Honorable D. Zotawan Titus, Deputy Minister of Posts and Telecommunications for Technical Services, representatives of the Liberia Telecommunications Authority present, Mr. PUL President, Mr. Koluba Zize Howard, President of ISOC Liberia Chapter, other officers and members of the Internet Society Liberia Chapter, Ms. Judith Hellerstein, and other representatives of development partners present, members of Liberia's growing Internet community, the Fourth Estate, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here today to serve as a speaker at this program of the ISOC Liberia chapter, especially so because its president, Mr. Howard, is one of my trusted employees at the LTA. I hope that you all have taken advantage of the wealth of knowledge and experience that he possesses, and the high energy and commitment that he brings to any job that's presented to him. I've been asked to speak on open access principles for connections to submarine cables and domestic backhaul networks and internet growth. The best practice guidelines for enabling open access adopted by the 2010 Global Symposium for Regulators defined open access as, and I quote, the possibility for third parties to use an existing network infrastructure, end quote. This refers to the granting of wholesale access to network infrastructure or services by dominant service providers to competing networks. Open access anticipates that access is provided effectively on fair and reasonable terms, for which there is some degree of transparency and non-discrimination. While other definitions exist which imply different degrees of openness, there is agreement that open access applies to infrastructure and means that suppliers are able to obtain access to network facilities on equal terms. The regulatory model and the conditions of access do vary across jurisdictions. However, there is agreement that open access is paramount if the new digital economy is to be achieved and the benefits of liberalization are delivered to end users in terms of more and better quality of service at affordable prices. Open access arrangements are crucial for promoting competition, greater consumer choice, and lower prices in markets where it would otherwise be extremely challenging. Permitting new businesses to connect to existing communications networks, for example, is more affordable and less risky than building networks from scratch. A 2006 Matson and Mitchell study on local open access networks for communities and municipalities, which was commissioned by the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, listed as a key finding that access to the internet was considered a prerequisite for improving any country's economic and social welfare. Access to the internet improves national economic and social welfare because it can provide a conduit to enable open and accessible government, enhance business competitiveness, and improve the quality of their citizens' lives through the improved delivery of specialized services to include e-government services, telemedicine, and education. However, The benefits of improved economic and social welfare can only occur where there is access to not only the internet, but high capacity bandwidth that can provide broadband access to applications, services, and information available on the internet. It should be noted that open access agreements have rarely been reached voluntarily, as firms prefer to reach commercial arrangements that are not necessarily non-discriminatory or transparent. Put another way, most open access policies have been the result of direct or indirect public regulatory interventions. However, regulators need to balance the benefits of open access policies against the incentives for different actors to invest in infrastructure and services. Too often, this is presented as a trade-off between increasing competition and a potential negative effect on investment. For example, if open access prices are too low, it may discourage investment in new networks by both incumbent firms and new entrants. The goal is to introduce open access policies in a way that facilitates new investments and drives incumbents to respond in kind, thus producing benefits for the overall market. In 2009, Liberia was among a handful of countries in the region which was not connected to the global network of submarine optical fiber infrastructure. Connectivity between Liberia and the outside world relied exclusively on expensive satellite with limited availability of high capacity bandwidth. At that time, Liberia had some of the highest connectivity costs, with average satellite prices between US $4,000 to $5,000 for 1 megabit, compared with about $200 in the US and approximately $500 in East Africa. This, coupled with a lack of national backbone infrastructure, created a difficult environment for expanding availability of internet services and advanced applications. Internet penetration in 2009 stood at 1.6% and was among the lowest in the Africa region, while prices paid by Liberian users were usually 2 to 3 times regional average. For purposes of international connectivity along the coast of West Africa and with the rest of the world, the most attractive and viable option for Liberia was to connect to the Africa Coast to Europe project, a 17,000 kilometer submarine fiber optic cable system connecting potentially 24 countries with a landing station in Liberia. The West Africa Regional Communications Infrastructure Program, often referred to as WARCIP, was initiated by the World Bank as a regional approach to ICT sector reform in the ECOWAS region. This was intended to promote robust ICT growth in the region and yield significant benefits to member countries. The government of the Republic of Liberia, through the WARCIP Liberia project, acquired a US $25.6 million loan from the World Bank to facilitate Liberia's participation in the ACE Cable Consortium, provide legal and regulatory support to safeguard open access, and provide implementation support through institutional capacity building. A challenging and extensive regulatory activity embarked upon by the LTA was to facilitate the formation of the Cable Consortium of Liberia, commonly referred to as CCL. CCL was intended as a special purpose vehicle created to construct, own, and operate the $25 million Africa Coast to Europe Liberia landing station. CCL represents a public-private partnership